Dynamic stretching. Dynamic stretching is when an individual mimics the exercise they are about to perform. Dynamic stretching mimics similar movements that are going to soon occur, preparing you both mentally and renewing schemes within your body, preparing your body for what's to come. Quoted by Richard Mamoni, personal trainer at Next Generation. Dynamic Stretch 1. Dynamic Stretch 1 is shown in these images. In this stretch, the athlete is looking and incorporating the hip range of motion. By stimulating the single leg motion, the athlete would perform in a squat. For the athlete to increase and intensify the stretch, the athlete will need to reach with one hand up and lean back into the stretch, leading into a better result. Dynamic Stretch 2. Dynamic Stretch 2 is used to help stimulate the squat movement. By leaning against the pole, the athlete is supporting himself for balance, and he is now able to force himself into a better position. Once the athlete is in a better forceful position, he will be able to correct his squat depth. This stretch also individually works on each unilateral hip as the athlete leans to each side. When the athlete leans to each side, the legs will push out, mimicking the squat movement. This movement is called sinking, or sitting into the hips, putting the athlete into a more stable, upright, and strong position to finalize the squat. If the hips are not mobilized properly, the athlete will lean forward during the squat, which will make a butt wink, which is when the bottom starts to curve due to tight hamstrings and the athlete will not be able to reach the correct depth. Dynamic Stretch 3. Dynamic Stretch 3 stretches the back extensors and trunk flexion due to the backwards motion. In the sitting up position where the legs are flared out, the athlete is stretching his hamstrings with motion, force, and leaning forwards. Static stretching. A static stretch is slow and constant, with the end position held for 30 seconds. Static Stretch 1. Static Stretch 1 stretches the ankle dorsiflexion, which stretches the plantar flexors of the foot. By utilizing the resistance band in this stretch, it adds more resistance. This plays a key component in a high bar squat as there is continuous resistance on the ankle and dorsiflexors. Static Stretch 1 video. Here is a video of Static Stretch 1 being performed. High bar. Static Stretch 2. Static Stretch 2 is quite similar to Dynamic Stretch 1, but this particular static stretch improves the flexibility of the quadriceps, and it does not mimic the squat movement, which is what dynamic stretching does. High bar squat. According to personal trainer Richard Mamoni from Next Generation Recreational Center, he believes the technique of a high bar squat includes closed feet as well as a very large dorsiflexion, giving my mobility to sit into my hips, forcing my knees to be in line with my toes, and also because of the large amount of ankle dorsiflexion, quite far over my toes. As well, my hands are a narrow grip, pulling the bar into my back. I break from the hips first, then knees, and allow slight trunk flexion. Practical. A practical was conducted where I tested and compared whether dynamic stretching or static stretching was a more effective pre-exercise warm-up when testing for a maximum strength in a high bar squat. This practical was led over 2 weeks to allow the athlete to have the perfect muscle and mind recovery. I conducted this practical by having an athlete who has knowledge and has the ability to perform the exercise of a high bar squat. The first week on the first day of the practical included a run through of the 3 specific dynamic stretches. From there, I worked with the athlete to encourage and support him to work on his 1 repetition max scheme. This was continued the next week with static stretches instead of dynamic stretches. Conclusion from practical. In conclusion, by replicating squat patterns by utilizing similar movements to warm up dynamic stretch 1, 2, and 3, though when actually performing at 1 RM that the outcome is that you are stronger. By replicating squat patterns, you are able to achieve better form. Therefore, the better form has many positive effects such as mental positivity, not being worried about depth, knee flares, etc. Strength gain, which is a lead-on effect of better form. The reason for this being that when proper form is executed, you are able to create more speed or torsion within the joints and muscles that you can unwind at most rapid pace, leading to a higher 1 RM. This was evident with a 7.5 kilogram increase. By performing these dynamic stretches, it opens the neural pathways and can increase the speed at which the muscle fibers contract. The second practical utilized the same simple 1 RM progression scheme, but static stretched instead. A lower 1 RM was reached 200 kilograms instead of 207.5 kilograms. This could have been due to a lesser amount of neural pathways open.